An FBI agent was treated like a criminal. A local cop never asked her name, never looked twice. He just assumed she was another suspect. He barked orders, ignored her calm replies, and put her in cuffs before even knowing who she really was. Tanya Whitfield didn't look like an FBI agent that evening. She wasn't wearing a blazer or carrying a holster. Instead, she wore a flowing green maxi dress, flat sandals, and simple gold hoops, the kind of outfit you'd choose for a quiet family day. She had spent the afternoon decorating with balloons, slicing cake, and celebrating her niece's 8th birthday. Her hair was tied in a loose bun. Her makeup was light, and she looked like any black woman driving home after time with family. As the sun dipped low, Tanya turned off Highway 11 toward her peaceful neighborhood in McDonough, Georgia. Kids played in driveways, lawns were neatly trimmed, and she was just one turn away from her garage when red and blue lights flared in her rear-view mirror. She frowned. She hadn't been speeding. No stop signs missed. No swerves. Still, she signaled and pulled to the shoulder, rolling her window halfway down. Her heart didn't pound, at least not yet. Tanya knew the rules. She had taught the rules. But knowing the protocol is different from living it. The officer approached quickly. No hello. No reason given. Turn off the engine. Hands on the wheel, he snapped. Tanya obeyed without protest. She turned the key, gripped the wheel firmly, and kept her voice steady. May I ask why I'm being stopped? I'll be the one asking questions. The cop shot back. Where are you coming from? Family gathering in Monroe. You alone? Yes. He circled her car, checked her plates, then came back to window. His eyes scanned her like she was already guilty. This vehicle matches a bolo. Possible theft reported 2 blocks from here. Tanya blinked. Theft? She hadn't been anywhere except her sister's house. May I show you my identification? She asked, calm but firm. Hands where I can see them. Tanya froze, fingers still pressed to the wheel. My ID is right here on the seat. I'm reaching for it. I didn't give you permission, he barked. Keep your hands up. This wasn't procedure. It wasn't even logical. Something inside Tanya shifted. That familiar click. Instinct taking over. She knew that what she said next and how she said it could shape the next 5 minutes of her life. So she didn't yell. She didn't argue. She sat still, let him feel in control, while she studied every detail. His tight grip on the flashlight, the aggressive tilt of his shoulders, the way he looked past her instead of at her. Another patrol car arrived. A woman officer stepped out, but stayed near the curb, watching silently. Tanya hoped for a pause, a chance to explain. None came. I need you out of the vehicle. The male officer barked. Tanya took a steady breath. Officer, I'm reaching for my ID. Please listen to me. I set out of the vehicle. Now. She moved slowly, unbuckling, keeping every gesture precise. Her badge was in her wallet by the passenger seat, but she knew better than to make sudden moves. Left foot out, right foot out, standing now, eyes level with his. She wasn't tall, but she didn't need height to hold her ground. Turn around. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist, twisted her roughly, and snapped cold metal cuffs around her arms. Tanya said nothing. The woman officer looked startled, but didn't step in. Suspect detained. The cop muttered into his radio, pressing her shoulder down. Tanya's jaw tightened, not from pain, but from something deeper. She had seen this behavior before. From suspects. From rookies who panicked. But never this close. Never directed at her. And it only got worse when she tried again to reach for her ID. The female officer finally moved closer. She didn't say much, just glanced at Tanya's cuffs, then at Kessler. Something unspoken passed between them, but no words came. Tanya's voice broke the silence, calm and steady. Officer, I need you to check my identification. It's in the wallet on the front seat. Kessler stared at her as if she'd insulted him. You'll stay right there until I say otherwise. I understand, Tanya replied evenly, but it might clear things up. Her tone was gentle, measured, so different from his clipped, harsh orders. He hesitated. then yanked her car door open and dug through her belongings like she'd already been convicted. Papers rustled. Her wallet snapped open. Then silence. When he finally spoke, his voice had shrunk. What is this? The badge gleamed in his hand. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Tanya J. Whitfield. 17 years of service. He froze. The female officer leaned closer, her eyebrows lifting as she read. Kessler turned back slowly. Why didn't you say something? Tanya's answer was cold, sharp as ice. I did. No anger, no raised voice. But the weight of those words emptied the air between them. Flustered, Kessler stepped forward. Let's get these off of you. Tanya turned slightly so he could reach the cuffs. Not because she trusted him, but because she wanted it over. His hands shook as he fumbled with the key. The cuffs clinked once, twice, before loosening. She rubbed her wrists only for a moment. Are you okay? The female officer asked, finally showing some humanity. Tanya met her gaze. Physically, yes. Kessler avoided eye contact, clearing his throat. Look, there's been a string of incidents in this neighborhood. Your car matched. Matched what? Tanya cut in. A plate number? A make? A confirmed description? He said, nothing. You saw me. You assumed. You escalated. Tanya continued, calm but direct. And now you're embarrassed. Not because you did wrong, but because I have a badge. This silence was heavier. Protocol couldn't hide him now. You're right, he muttered, the words barely landing. I got it wrong. No, Tanya corrected. You didn't get it wrong. You chose wrong. There's a difference. Her words weren't meant to sting. They were meant to stay. She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't expect one. The female officer's look was half apology, half confusion, wrestling with the moment. I need your badge number and full name, Tanya told Kessler. He hesitated, then gave both quietly, barely above a whisper. Tanya, retrieve your phone from the car. She snapped a photo of her red, cuff-marked wrists, then his nameplate. She didn't explain what she would do with them. She didn't need to. Her wallet still lay open on the passenger seat, the gold badge shining under the dome light. Her name, her photo, her title, all official, all undeniable. Tanya picked it up, not to display it, but to reclaim it. This badge was part of her, earned through exams, fieldwork, long nights, and sacrifice. Not something to be tossed around by someone who hadn't even asked her name. Kessler stood awkwardly, arms crossed, posture stripped of authority. What replaced it was discomfort, even shame. Finally, he forced out, Agent Whitfield, as though formality could erase what had happened. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience. Tanya repeated softly. She nodded once, almost to herself. That's what this was to you. Kessler blinked. Look, sometimes we make fast calls in the field. Things happen quick. We're trained to... You're trained to assess... Tanya cut him off, firm but not loud. To ask questions. To follow procedures. You skipped all of it. He looked down. Tanya turned to the female officer, who had stayed mostly silent. What's your name? Officer Jenna Rollins, she answered. You saw how he handled this. You saw me comply. You watched him skip every basic step. Are you going to report this? Rollins shifted uncomfortably, caught between conscience and protocol. I'll speak to my supervisor. Tanya held her gaze. Good. Then she turned back to Kessler. Do you have any idea what could have happened? What you might have caused if I twitched the wrong way? If I raised my voice? You didn't know I was FBI. You didn't know anything. And still you decided I looked like a problem. Kessler said nothing. Tanya leaned against her car door, steadying her breath. Tanya hadn't lost her composure once, but now, in the silence, the weight began to settle, not just from this one night, but from years of knowing something like this could happen, would happen, no matter how many titles or awards she earned. Officer Rollins stepped closer, her voice softer. Agent Whitfield, would you like us to call a supervisor to the scene? No, Tanya said firmly. I'll handle this myself. She checked her phone again, confirming the photo of Kessler's nameplate. Then she lifted her camera one last time to capture her wrists red and ring from the cuffs. Not broken, not bleeding, but sharp and undeniable. Kessler stood a few feet away, looking like a man who knew a storm was coming and had no umbrella, no shelter. Tanya locked eyes with him. You made a choice tonight, and I'll be making mine. Then she slid into her car. No slammed door, no screech of tires, just a quiet rumble of an engine and a woman driving home without looking back. The drive was only minutes, but every second replayed in her head like a film she didn't want to watch. Not out of fear, out of exhaustion. Exhaustion from how quickly it escalated. Exhaustion from how normal it felt. And the most haunting thought of all, if she hadn't had that badge, she might still be standing on the roadside in cuffs. Or worse. But Tanya didn't walk away. She filed a report. And that's where the real story began. The next morning, she rose early. Sleep had been thin. Her wrists still ached, not from the metal, but from the memory. At her kitchen table, she sipped black coffee, staring at a blank notepad. She wasn't writing yet. She was replaying everything, step by step, word for word, making sure her memory was sharp. No exaggerations, no guesses, just facts. By 9 a.m., she was inside the Atlanta field office. She walked past colleagues she'd known for years, most of them unaware of what unfolded the night before. She didn't make a scene. She didn't announce it. She simply asked to meet with internal affairs. The interview room was cold and bare. Tanya sat on one side of a narrow table. Across from her was Gregory Sims, a tall, pale investigator with crow's feet at his eyes and a quiet way of listening she appreciated. She told him everything, from the flashing lights to the cuffs, to the exact moment Kessler saw her badge. Sims never interrupted. He only scribbled in a spiral notebook until she finished. Then he looked up slowly. You're not the first person to mention that officer's name. Tanya's brows furrowed. Excuse me? Sims exhaled. There's a growing stack of reports tied to Officer Kessler. Minor force complaints. Profiling. Stop and question cases without proper cause. Many were brushed off. Tanya leaned forward. How many? He hesitated. 8 formal complaints. 3 from young black men. 2 from Latina women. 1 from a Navy veteran. All within the last 18 months. Her hands curled into fists beneath the table. And nothing's been done. He's been counseled, sent to refresher training. But nothing stuck. The department's been reluctant to make it public. You mean they've been protecting him? Tanya said flatly. Sims didn't argue. What happens now? I'll file this as official misconduct, he replied. Because of your position, it won't get buried. It goes straight to the top of the review board. Tanya nodded, but didn't feel relief. She felt heavy. Sims added quietly, I won't pretend the system works like it should, but your complaint carries weight. More than you realize. I didn't do this for weight, Tanya said. I did it because if it were someone without a badge, someone who didn't know their rights, they wouldn't have stood a chance. Sims gave a tight nod. Understood. Before leaving, Tanya handed him the photos, her wrists, Kessler's badge, the timestamp. He thanked her and promised to be in touch. Back in the parking lot, Tanya sat in her car for several minutes, engine off. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She just stared at the concrete wall ahead, thinking about all the names that never made it to an office like Sims's. People without badges, without titles. People written off as problems, then forgotten. But she wasn't going to forget. That afternoon, her phone rang. A friend from a U.S. attorney's office in DeKalb County. News was spreading. You really filed it? The friend asked. Yes. You know this is going to get messy, right? I'm counting on it. Tanya hung up and returned to her notes. Names, dates, questions no one had asked until now. Because this wasn't just about her. But exposing the truth brought more attention than she was ready for. 2 days later, Tanya's name was trending on local Twitter feeds, even though she hadn't spoken a word to the press. It started with a leak. Someone inside the department released details of the report. A high-ranking federal agent wrongfully detained by a local officer. The story spread like fire. By noon, a local journalist had published, FBI agent mistaken for suspect, detained by McDonough officer. They didn't print her name, but it wasn't hard to figure out. By evening, Tanya's inbox overflowed with interview requests, messages of support, and angry notes accusing her of overreacting. Outside the department, protesters gathered with signs. She had a badge. What if she didn't? And stop policing based on assumptions. The tension was raw. The story wasn't just about Tanya anymore. It had struck a nerve. She hadn't asked for the spotlight, but she couldn't hide from it now. That same afternoon, Tanya was called into a private meeting at the FBI office. Two senior officials sat across from her in a glass-walled room. Their voices were respectful but careful. This has become public faster than we expected. One of them said quietly, "I didn't leak it." Tanya answered, "I filed a report, that's all. We believe you, but you know how complicated this is going to get. You're a federal agent caught in a local mess." "It's not a controversy," Tanya said firmly. "It's misconduct. Let's call it what it is." The two men exchanged a look. The older one leaned closer. "Are you ready to speak publicly if this escalates?" "I'm not here to play politics," Tanya replied, "but I won't stay silent either." Back home, the noise grew louder. A local news van parked across the street. Neighbors knocked more often, some to offer support, others just out of curiosity. Social media was worse. Some praised her for staying calm and setting an example. Others accused her of using her badge to act superior. But the comments that cut deepest were the ones saying nothing would have happened if she had just obeyed, as if silence and submission had ever been enough. On the third day, Officer Kessler was put on administrative leave while the department launched an investigation. A vague, two-sentence statement was released, carefully impersonal. But people weren't buying it anymore. That weekend, Tanya was invited to a community town hall in Covington, 20 minutes east of where the incident happened. The local pastor reached out personally. "We're not trying to make you a symbol," he told her over the phone. "We just want people to hear the truth from you." She hesitated, then agreed. The night of the town hall, the church was packed. Folding chairs filled the aisles, and people stood shoulder to shoulder against the walls. Tanya sat quietly in the front row until her name was called. When she walked to the podium, there was no applause, only stillness. She looked over the crowd, then down at her hands resting on the microphone. "I'm not here tonight as Agent Whitfield," she began. "I'm here as someone who followed every rule I was taught and still ended up in handcuffs on the side of the road." The room stayed silent. No one interrupted. Tanya told her story, not for pity, not for drama, but simply for truth. When she finished, she looked at a group of teenage boys in the front pew. Their eyes were wide, their posture tense. "I'm not special because I wear a badge," she said. "I was lucky I had it that night. But that shouldn't be the difference between humiliation and dignity." The crowd remained quiet, not because they didn't care, but because they did. Tanya kept her focus on what mattered most. What comes next? A week later, she sat outside a small community center in Stonecrest, waiting for a youth mentorship event to begin. She hadn't planned to speak. She wasn't part of the program. But the coordinator, a retired teacher named Miss Jean, had called her directly. "They need to see someone like you," she said. "Not just for what happened, but for how you carried it." Tanya didn't want to be a symbol. She hated the word grace being thrown at her like a prize. She hadn't been calm that night to prove a point. She'd been calm because the other option might have left her on the pavement. Still, she came. Not for headlines, but for the kids who had already heard the story in whispers, clips, and comment threads. Inside, the space was plain: plastic chairs, old tile floors, a tilted podium. About 30 kids, mostly high schoolers, sat loosely in rows, half listening to a volunteer talk about careers. Tanya stood in the back until Miss Jean waved her forward. A few heads turned. Some whispered. She didn't blame them. Her face had been in the local papers, her name in heated debates. She stepped to the front with no script and no microphone. "I wasn't planning to talk today," she said softly, "but I'm glad I came." A few kids straightened in their seats. "I want to tell you about a moment that could have gone very wrong," she continued. But more than that, I want to explain why it didn't. She spoke plainly, without dramatics. She didn't need them. She told him how she was pulled over, how the officer shouted instead of speaking, how she stayed calm, not because she felt safe, but because she knew the risk of being misunderstood. She told him about the cuffs, the silence, and the badge that changed everything. Then she paused. You know what scared me the most? She asked. That without that badge, I was invisible to him. Not a person, not a professional, just a profile. A boy in the front, maybe 15, raised his hand. What would you have done if you didn't have your badge? Tanya let the question hang. I honestly don't know, she said. And that's what keeps me up some nights. The room went still again, not from shock this time, but respect. Another teen, a girl with thick braids and a notebook, asked, Do you think he'll get fired? I don't know that either, Tanya admitted. What I do know is that I spoke up, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been stopped and didn't have a title to protect them. Someone clapped. Then another. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. But it was real. Afterward, students came up quietly. One boy asked for advice on dealing with authority without losing himself. A girl said she wanted to study law. Tanya listened, giving honest words instead of polished ones. By the time she stepped outside, the sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving an amber glow in the lot. Miss Jean followed with Tupperware cookies, insisting Tanya take them. You didn't come here to be a role model, she said, but that's what you became. Tanya smiled softly. I just wanted to be heard. Jean nodded. And you were. Later, on her back porch, Tanya scrolled through her phone. A message blinked at the top from an officer she had trained years ago. Saw what happened. Proud of how you handled it. We still have work to do, but you reminded many of us why we joined in the first place. She didn't reply right away. She didn't need to. She set the phone down and leaned back, watching the night settle over her yard. This wasn't a story about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about reminding people that dignity doesn't come from a badge. It belongs to you long before you show one. And if you've ever been judged before being seen, speak up, because silence only keeps the wrong people in power.